The maid raised the rich man's child, but the secret changed everything when the boy called her mom in front of everyone. I stayed silent. Then a hidden letter, a DNA test, and one cruel grandmother turned a mansion full of lies into the only home I ever needed. Original story. My name is Sophia. I was 31 when the truth finally came out. For most of my life, rich people's houses were places I cleaned, not places I belonged. I knew how to polish marble floors until they looked like water. I knew how to fold guest towels into perfect thirds. I knew how to walk quietly through rooms where people discussed vacations, investments, and charities while pretending I was part of the furniture. That was my job. Be useful, be invisible, do not ask questions. I started working at Caleb's house in Austin 3 years after the worst day of my life. At 26, I gave birth to a baby boy in a hospital outside Dallas. I had no husband, no rich family, no expensive private doctor. Just my mother holding one hand and a nurse telling me to breathe. I remember hearing my baby cry once, just once. Then everything became confusion. Doctors rushed in. Someone said breathing complications. Someone else said they needed to take him for observation. Hours later, a woman in a gray sweater came into my room and told me my son had passed away. I never saw his body. That sentence haunted me for years. I asked. I begged. I cried until my throat burned. They told me it was better to remember him peacefully. They told me paperwork would follow. They told me grief makes people imagine things. His name was supposed to be Lucas. I left that hospital empty-handed and never fully came back to myself. 3 years later, I was hired as a live-in maid and part-time nanny at the home of Caleb, a wealthy real estate developer. His mansion sat behind iron gates, surrounded by oak trees and expensive silence. His wife, Claire, had died 2 years before I arrived, leaving behind one child, a little boy named Oliver. Oliver was 5 when I first met him. He had dark curls, serious eyes, and a habit of standing in doorways without speaking, like he was waiting to be invited into his own life. The house was full of people, but somehow he was always alone. Caleb loved him, I could tell, but Caleb worked constantly. Meetings, phone calls, trips, investors, lawyers. His mother, Vivian, managed the household like a queen guarding a throne. She wore pearls at breakfast and disappointment like perfume. The first week I worked there, Vivian told me, "Oliver is sensitive, do not encourage clinginess." I said, "He is a child." She looked at me like I had spoken out of turn. Exactly. Children need structure, not emotional confusion. I learned quickly that in that house, love had rules. Oliver was not allowed to run in the hallway, not allowed to eat in the kitchen, not allowed to ask too many questions about his mother, not allowed to cry for longer than Vivian considered appropriate. But children know who is safe. At first, Oliver followed me silently while I worked. If I dusted the library, he sat on the rug with a book upside down. If I folded laundry, he stood near the door holding a dinosaur. If I made soup, he watched from the kitchen island and asked why carrots turned sweet when cooked. Little by little, he started talking. He told me he hated the big dining room because everyone sounded far away in it. He told me he remembered his mother's perfume but not her voice. He told me his grandmother said crying made people weak, so he only cried into his pillow. That night after he fell asleep, I went to the laundry room and cried into a clean towel. Not because he was my child, because he was a child. And no child should have to earn comfort. Over the next 2 years, I became the person Oliver ran to when he scraped his knee, when he had nightmares, when he lost his first tooth, when he got scared during thunderstorms. I packed his school lunches. I learned which pajamas made him feel brave. I sat beside his bed and read the same space adventure book so many times I could say it from memory. Caleb noticed. One evening he came home early and found Oliver asleep against my shoulder on the living room couch. I tried to move, embarrassed. Caleb said quietly, "Don't wake him," so I stayed still. He stood there for a moment, looking at his son like he was seeing something he had missed. Then he said, "He sleeps better when you're here." I said, "Children sleep better when they feel safe." Caleb looked down, like the words hurt or helped, maybe both. But Vivian hated it. She hated how Oliver reached for my hand, hated how he asked if I could sit beside him at dinner when Caleb was traveling, hated how he called for me before anyone else. Then came his 7th birthday. Vivian planned a party with white tents, hired musicians, a magician, and a cake taller than Oliver. There were business partners, wealthy neighbors, women in expensive dresses pretending they liked children, and men who shook Caleb's hand while checking their phones. I was supposed to stay in the background, serve lemonade, watch the children, clean spills, smile only when necessary. Oliver hated the crowd. I saw it immediately. His shoulders were tight, his face had gone pale. When everyone started singing happy birthday, he looked around the tent like he wanted to disappear. Then the magician asked him to come forward. Oliver froze. Vivian whispered sharply, "Oliver, don't embarrass your father." I stepped closer without thinking. Oliver's eyes found mine. He ran straight past the magician, past Vivian, past Caleb, and wrapped both arms around my waist. Then, in front of everyone, he cried, "Mom, please don't make me go up there." The whole tent went silent, not quiet, silent. Vivian's face changed first, shock, then rage. Caleb looked like someone had opened a locked room inside him. I knelt in front of Oliver and whispered, "You're okay. You don't have to perform if you're scared." Vivian snapped, "Sophia, kitchen." Now, I stood slowly. Oliver clung to my dress. Vivian stepped close enough that only I could hear her at first. "You forgot your place." I said no. I remembered his fear. Her voice rose. "You are staff. You are paid help. You are not his mother." Oliver started crying harder. Caleb finally said, "Mother, enough." But Vivian was not finished. She pointed toward the house and said, "Pack your things. You are done here." Oliver screamed. A real scream, not spoiled, not dramatic, broken. He grabbed my arm and said, "Please don't leave me." I looked at Caleb. I waited for him to say something strong, something final. He opened his mouth, then closed it. That hurt more than Vivian's words. So I gently removed Oliver's hands from my dress, kissed his forehead, and said, "I will not disappear without saying goodbye. I promise." Then I walked into the house and packed my small suitcase. Update 1: 3 days later, I was staying in a cheap motel off the highway when the first message came. It was from Caleb. "Sophia, I'm sorry. She had no right to speak to you that way. Oliver hasn't stopped crying. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. I wanted to answer, not for Caleb, for Oliver. But I had learned something from years of grief. When powerful people are emotional, they apologize. When they calm down, they protect themselves. So I wrote one sentence: "If Oliver needs me, you know where to find me, but I will not return to be humiliated." He replied within a minute. "Fair." That surprised me. Vivian's messages were not fair. She called me ungrateful, manipulative, a woman who had taken advantage of a motherless child. Then she sent a final message that made my blood turn cold. "Girls like you always look for a way into wealthy families. Girls like me." I blocked her. That evening, someone knocked on my motel door. I looked through the peephole and saw a woman around my age holding a manila envelope. She had red eyes and a nurse's badge clipped to her purse. My first thought was that Vivian had sent someone. I opened the door with the chain still on. She said, "Are you Sophia?" I said, "Who's asking?" She swallowed hard. "My name is Nora. I was Claire's friend, Claire, Caleb's late wife." I did not open the door wider. Nora said, "Claire left something with me before she died. She told me if anything ever happened to her and if Oliver ever started asking for the woman who sings the blue song, I was supposed to find you." My hand went cold on the door. The blue song. I used to sing one lullaby while cleaning Oliver's room. The same lullaby my mother sang to me. The same one I sang to my baby when I was pregnant. I opened the door. Nora sat on the edge of the motel chair and handed me the envelope like it weighed 50 pounds. Inside was a letter. Claire's handwriting was thin and shaky. "Sophia, if this reaches you, then I failed to make things right while I was alive. I am sorry. I was told Oliver came through a private adoption arranged by Vivian. Caleb believed it was legal. I wanted to believe it too, but after Oliver turned 3, I found documents hidden in Vivian's office. Hospital forms, a birth record, your name, your signature forged on a surrender form. I confronted Vivian. She said you were poor, unstable, and lucky your child was given a better life. I wanted to go to the police, but I got sick. Then I got weaker. I made Nora promise to find you if Oliver ever found his way back to you. I think somehow children know. I stopped breathing normally, the room tilted. I read the line again, your name, your signature forged, my baby. No, I said it out loud. No, Nora was crying. She said, I'm sorry, I should have come sooner. Claire made me promise, but after she died, Vivian threatened me. She said I'd be sued, ruined, accused of stealing family documents. I was scared. I wanted to hate her. But my hands were shaking too badly to hold hate. Inside the envelope were copies, hospital admission papers, a birth certificate amendment, a private payment record, a photo of a newborn baby wrapped in a blue blanket with tiny yellow stars. My blanket, the one my mother and I sewed by hand. The hospital told me it had been lost. I made a sound I did not recognize. Nora reached for me, but I moved away. For 7 years, I had mourned a child who was alive. For 2 years, I had tucked him into bed without knowing he was mine. I called Caleb. He answered immediately. I said, come alone. He said, what happened? I said, come alone, Caleb, and bring Oliver's hairbrush. He arrived 40 minutes later, pale and confused. I handed him the letter. He read it standing up. By the end, he had one hand against the wall. He whispered, no, that was all. No defense, no excuses, no shouting, just no. Then he sat down like his knees had stopped working. I said, did you know? He looked at me, and for the first time since I met him, the rich man was gone. There was only a terrified father. He said, I swear on Oliver's life I didn't. I believed him. Not because I wanted to. Because his grief looked too real to be performed. We did the DNA test legally the next morning. Caleb paid for everything, not the cheap online kind, a certified test through an attorney. The results came back 5 days later. Probability of maternity, 99.9998%. Oliver was my son. Update 2. 2 weeks later, the moment Vivian found out, the mansion became a battlefield. She called Caleb first, then Nora, then me from 3 different numbers. I did not answer, so she came to the motel. I saw her black car pull into the parking lot like a storm cloud on wheels. She stepped out in cream-colored clothes and diamonds, looking offended that poverty existed near her. I stood outside my room. She said, you have no idea what you're doing. I said, I know exactly what was done to me. She lifted her chin. That boy has had the best schools, the best doctors, the best life. What did you have to offer him? A motel room and a sad story. I said I had his mother's arms. She flinched. Just slightly. Then she said the sentence that told me everything. Blood does not make a mother. I said, then why did you steal him from his? For the first time, Vivian had no answer. Caleb arrived 5 minutes later with his attorney. He told Vivian to leave. She said he was being emotional. He said, no, mother. I am being awake. That was the first time I saw him stand up to her, not loudly, not dramatically, but fully. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers, police reports, court filings, and child therapists. I refused to let Oliver be dragged like a prize between adults. That mattered more than revenge. The therapist said we had to move slowly. Oliver knew me as Sophia, the woman who made pancakes shaped like bears, the woman who sang when he was scared, the woman he had accidentally called Mom before the entire world changed. We could not simply sit him down and say, surprise, your whole life is a lie. So Caleb and I told him gently. Together, we sat in the playroom, the one with the big windows and the train table. Oliver was holding his stuffed fox. Caleb looked like he had not slept in a week. I probably looked worse. Caleb said, buddy, we learned something important about when you were a baby. Oliver looked at me first. Children always know where the truth is standing. I said, you grew in my tummy, Oliver. A long time ago, someone took you away from me and I was told you went to heaven, but you didn't. You were here. And somehow I found you again. He stared at me. Then he said, so you were my first mom. I cried then. I tried not to, but I did. I said yes. He looked at Caleb. Are you still my dad? Caleb's face broke. He pulled Oliver into his arms and said, always, if you want me, always. Oliver said, I want both, and that became the rule. Both, not easy, not simple, but honest. Vivian tried to fight it. She claimed Claire had been confused from medication. She claimed Nora forged the letter. She claimed I had seduced the child emotionally for money. She even tried to file an emergency petition saying I was a danger to Oliver. That ended badly for her. Caleb's attorney produced the bank records. $85,000 paid from Vivian's private trust to a former hospital administrator 2 days after my son was born. Another $20,000 to a private attorney who no longer practiced law. Copies of the forged surrender form. My signature spelled wrong. Sophia with an accent. I have never used an accent in my legal name. Small mistakes bring down big lies. The hospital administrator, now retired and living in Arizona, was contacted by investigators. At first he denied everything. Then his own daughter convinced him to cooperate after she found old emails. He admitted Vivian had arranged what he called an off-book placement. Off-book. That was the phrase he used for stealing my child. I wanted to scream when I heard it. Instead, I sat in my attorney's office and asked, what happens next? My attorney, Denise, said, we fight for legal recognition first, then custody, then accountability. I said, I don't want to destroy Oliver's life. Denise looked at me gently, then we build it carefully. Caleb surprised me again. He did not hide behind money. He did not try to bury the truth. He filed his own statement confirming that he had believed Oliver's placement was legal and that he supported full investigation into Vivian's actions. His board advised silence. His public relations consultant advised distance. Vivian's friends advised loyalty. Caleb chose truth. One evening, outside the courthouse, he said, I don't know how to apologize for raising your son while you grieved him. I said, you loved him. He nodded, eyes red. I said, that is the only reason I can stand here and not hate you. He covered his face with one hand. For all his wealth, Caleb could not buy his way out of guilt. But he also did not run from it. That mattered. Final update: 3 months later, the final hearing was not like movies. No dramatic confession, no shouting across the courtroom, no judge slamming a gavel while everyone gasped. It was quieter than that, which somehow made it heavier. Vivian sat in a navy suit with her lawyer beside her, looking smaller than she had ever looked in the mansion. Not sorry, just exposed. The judge reviewed the DNA test, Claire's letter, Nora's testimony, payment records, and the forged documents. Then she looked at Vivian and said, this court has rarely seen such a deliberate abuse of wealth, access, and power. Vivian stared straight ahead. She did not look at me. Maybe she couldn't. Temporary legal custody was adjusted. I was recognized as Oliver's biological mother. Caleb remained his legal father during the transition because removing him suddenly would have punished Oliver for adult crimes. We agreed to a shared guardianship structure while the court reviewed the adoption fraud case. It was not perfect, but it protected Oliver. That was the point. Vivian lost all unsupervised access. Later, criminal charges moved forward against her and the former hospital administrator. I will not pretend the legal process healed me. It did not. Paperwork cannot return 7 stolen birthdays. A court order cannot give me back first steps, first words, first fevers, first mornings. But it gave me the truth, and the truth gave me a place to stand. Caleb sold the mansion 6 months later. People were shocked. Vivian was furious. His business friends called it emotional. Caleb said the house had too many ghosts. He bought a smaller home 10 minutes from mine. Yes, mine. Part of the civil settlement gave me enough money to buy a modest 3-bedroom house with a blue front door, a backyard, and a kitchen where nobody tells children they are too loud. I also started a cleaning company with 2 women I used to work with. We named it Fresh Start. Maybe too obvious. I do not care. Oliver has 2 rooms now, one at Caleb's house and one at mine. At Caleb's, he has his train table. At mine, he has glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling and the blue blanket with yellow stars folded at the end of his bed. The real one. The blanket I made before he was born. The first night he slept at my house, I stood in the hallway for almost an hour, listening to him breathe. Not because I was afraid he would disappear, because for 7 years I had dreamed of hearing that sound. At breakfast the next morning, he asked if he should call me Sophia or Mom. I almost dropped the pancake pan. I said, "You can call me whatever feels true." He thought about it very seriously because Oliver thinks like a tiny judge. Then he said, "At school I'll say Sophia because it's easier. But at home, can I say Mom sometimes?" I said, "Whenever you want." He nodded and poured too much syrup on his pancakes. That was the moment I understood something. Motherhood is not always one clean line. Sometimes it is blood. Sometimes it is bedtime stories. Sometimes it is the person who stays during nightmares. Sometimes it is the person who spends years searching without knowing what they are searching for. Caleb is still Oliver's dad. I will never take that from either of them. He raised him with love even inside a house built on lies, and I am his mother. Not because a court finally wrote it down, because I was his mother before anyone stole the proof. As for Vivian, I have not spoken to her again. She sent one letter through her attorney. Not an apology, an explanation. She wrote that she only wanted what was best for her family, that Claire could not carry a child, that Caleb deserved an heir, that I was young and poor and would have struggled. I read it once. Then I put it in a drawer with the hospital papers and the DNA test, not because I needed her words. Because one day, when Oliver is grown, if he asks how people justify terrible things, I will show him. Here is what I learned. Some people do not think cruelty is cruelty when they wrap it in money. They call it opportunity, protection, a better life. They steal from the poor and tell themselves they are rescuing someone. But love is not theft. Love does not need forged signatures. Love does not bury a mother and call it mercy. For years, I thought my son was gone. Then I walked into a rich man's house to clean floors and found him waiting for me with serious eyes and a broken little heart. People will call that coincidence. I don't. I call it the truth finding its way home. If this story touched your heart, please comment below whether you've ever seen a secret change everything, or what you think Sophia should do next. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this story with someone who believes a mother's love can survive even the deepest lie.